My son called me. I'm getting married tomorrow. I withdrew all the money from your bank accounts and sold the house. Bye. I was sitting at my usual corner table at a small coffee shop in Houston when my phone rang. It was just after 8 in the morning. The rush had already passed. Soft jazz played through the speakers. The smell of fresh coffee and warm pastries filled the air. I had ordered the same thing I always did. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. I liked my mornings simple, predictable. I was 64 years old, and routine was something I had earned. I remember glancing at my phone and smiling faintly when I saw my son's name on the screen. Logan, my only child. He rarely called this early unless something important was happening. For a brief moment, I thought maybe he was finally calling just to talk, just to ask how I was. I answered. "Mom," he said quickly, without greeting. His voice was upbeat, almost rushed. "I'm getting married tomorrow." I blinked. Tomorrow? "That's sudden," I replied, gripping my coffee cup a little tighter. "Yeah, well, Madeline and I decided not to wait," he continued. "Listen, I just wanted to let you know so you don't freak out when you hear from the bank." The noise of the cafe faded. I could hear only my own breathing. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I withdrew all the money from your bank accounts," he said casually, "and I sold the house. We needed the funds to start our life. You'll be fine, Mom. You have Social Security." I stared at the steam rising from my coffee as if it belonged to someone else's table. "You sold my house?" I whispered. "I had access," he replied. "Everything was legal. I have to go. The caterer's calling. We'll talk after the honeymoon. Bye." The line went dead. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't drop my phone. I sat there, frozen, while the world around me kept moving. Cups clinked. Someone laughed near the counter. A barista called out another order. Then something unexpected happened. I laughed. At first it was quiet, a breathy sound that surprised even me. Then it grew louder, sharp and uncontrollable, until tears blurred my vision. A woman at the next table glanced at me with concern, because in that moment, sitting alone with my untouched coffee, I realized something my son did not know. The house he sold was not the house I lived in, and by the time he understood what he had done, it would already be far too late. As I sat there in that coffee shop, waiting for the shaking in my hands to stop, memories began surfacing one by one, uninvited and relentless. I raised Logan alone. His father, Matthew Carter, died when Logan was 11. A construction accident. One phone call in the middle of the night that split my life clean in two. From that moment on, there was no safety net, no second income, no backup plan. Just me, a grieving child, and a quiet promise I made to myself that Logan would never feel abandoned by the world. I worked long hours in municipal records administration, a job no one ever noticed, but one that demanded precision, confidentiality, and absolute attention to detail. During the day, I processed permits and legal filings. At night, I organized case files for extra pay. I skipped vacations. I wore the same coats for years. I learned how to stretch groceries and how to hide exhaustion behind a calm smile. Logan grew up knowing only one thing. His mother would always handle it. And I did. When he wanted to attend a better school, I found a way. When he dreamed of working in finance and living a larger life than the one we had, I encouraged him. I told him ambition was not a flaw. I told him he deserved more. What I never taught him was restraint. The first signs appeared slowly, almost invisibly. About a year ago, Logan started asking questions he had never asked before. Casual questions, delivered with concern wrapped neatly around them. "How are your savings doing, Mom? Do you have everything organized in case something happens? Have you thought about simplifying your finances as you get older?" At the time, it sounded thoughtful, responsible even. I told myself I was lucky to have a son who cared. Then Madeline entered the picture. She was young, polished, and always perfectly composed. She worked in high-end event coordination, the kind of job where appearances mattered more than substance. When I met her, she complimented my home repeatedly: the layout, the neighborhood, the value. She never called it cozy. She called it an asset. I noticed how her eyes lingered on framed photos, on my bookshelf, on the locked filing cabinet in the hallway. She asked questions that felt harmless, but landed strangely. "Is this house fully paid off? Did you ever think about downsizing? Houston real estate is incredible right now." Logan would laugh it off, squeezing her hand, telling me she was just curious by nature. I wanted to believe him. Then came the request. Logan said he wanted to help me set up automatic payments and digital access, so I would not have to worry about bills or paperwork. He told me stories about colleagues whose parents had missed payments or been scammed. He said he worried about me living alone. I hesitated. I had spent my entire career guarding records and signatures. I understood the danger of access, but he was my son. I agreed to limited access, viewing permissions, emergency transfer capability only. Or so I thought. Looking back now, I realize the moment I trusted him with my financial doorway was the moment he quietly stepped inside and began measuring what he could take. And sitting there in that coffee shop, my untouched cup growing cold, I finally understood the truth I had refused to see. This was not sudden. This was planned. I did not leave the coffee shop right away. I sat there long enough for my cup to go cold, for the waitress to walk past me twice with a polite, uncertain smile, and for the morning crowd to thin out. My phone lay face down on the table, silent now, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. When I finally stood up, my legs felt strangely steady. That frightened me more than if they had shaken. Shock has a way of numbing you before it lets the pain in. I drove home slowly, obeying every traffic light, my mind replaying Logan's voice, calm, efficient, detached. He had not sounded angry or desperate. He had sounded prepared. The moment I stepped inside my house, I went straight to my desk and opened my laptop. For years, I checked my accounts once a week, every Sunday morning. That routine had never failed me. I logged in with familiar motions, expecting confusion, maybe a mistake, maybe a misunderstanding that could still be undone. What I saw made my chest tighten. My primary savings account balance was just over $900. $900. The account that once held nearly $200,000. Money built from decades of careful work, survivor benefits, and disciplined saving, was almost empty. My checking account was worse, $58 and some change. I refreshed the page, once, twice, as if the numbers might apologize and return to where they belonged. They did not. I called the bank. The representative was polite and professional, her voice steady as she verified my identity. She pulled up my records and paused. "Mrs. Carter," she said gently, "it appears the transfers were made over several weeks. All were executed through authorized online access. Authorized. The funds were transferred to an account under the name Logan Carter. I closed my eyes. I asked her to read the dates out loud. Each one landed like a small blow. Not one large theft, many careful ones, spaced out, strategic, designed not to raise alarms. This was not panic. This was planning. I ended the call and sat there in the quiet of my living room, listening to the refrigerator hum, the house utterly unaware that its foundation had just shifted. I thought of every time Logan had reassured me, every smile, every concerned question about my future. I thought of Madeline's careful compliments, her interest masked as admiration. I did not cry then either. What I felt instead was something colder, a slow, sinking realization that the person I trusted most had been studying me the way a stranger studies a lock. Later that afternoon, I drove past the rental property on Cedar Ridge Drive, the one Logan believed was my primary home. The tenant's car was in the driveway. The porch light was still the one I had installed myself. Nothing had changed there yet, but something inside me had, because now I knew the truth. Logan had not taken my money in a moment of weakness or desperation. He had not made a mistake. He had emptied my accounts knowing exactly what he was doing. And he believed I would be too shocked, too ashamed, or too afraid to stop him. What he did not know, as I sat there in my quiet house with the afternoon light stretching across the floor, was that I had spent my entire life understanding systems, records, and consequences. And once you see the pattern clearly, you cannot unsee it. The betrayal was complete. But the story was only beginning. That evening, just as the sun dipped behind the neighboring rooftops, my phone rang again. Logan. This time, I answered without hesitation. "Mom," he said, his tone confident now, almost relieved. "I wanted to make sure you understood everything. The house sale closed this morning." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the familiar crack in the ceiling I had meant to repair for years. "You sold my house," I said slowly. "Yes," he replied. "I told you. We got a great price. Cash buyer. No complications." I closed my eyes. "Which house, Logan?" There was a pause, just long enough. "The one on Cedar Ridge," he said, "obviously." I felt something shift inside my chest. Not pain this time. Clarity. Cedar Ridge. Not the house I was sitting in. Not the place where I had lived for over 2 decades. Not the home where Logan had grown up, scraped his knees on the driveway, celebrated birthdays at the kitchen table. Cedar Ridge was the rental, the modest property I had purchased years ago for supplemental income, the one currently occupied by a family with a long-term lease still in effect. The one Logan believed was my primary residence, because I had never corrected his assumptions. I said nothing. "I gave you 30 days, Logan continued. "That's more than fair. You can downsize. Plenty of seniors do it. You'll be closer to public transportation. Madeline says it's actually healthier." Madeline says. I pictured her smile, polished, certain, already rearranging a future built on money she believed was secure. "Did you tell the buyers about the tenants?" I asked calmly. Another pause, longer this time. "That's not really my problem," Logan said. "The lease will be handled. The paperwork was clean." Clean. I thanked him for calling and ended the conversation. For several minutes I sat completely still. Then I stood, walked to the hallway cabinet, unlocked it, and pulled out the folder marked Cedar Ridge. Inside were copies of the active lease, security deposit records, correspondence with the tenants, all dated and documented, all legally binding. Logan had sold a property he did not have the right to sell in the way he sold it. Worse, he had misrepresented its status. And that was only the beginning. I moved to my desk and opened a second file, the one Logan had never known existed. My real home, the one I lived in, was not in my personal name. It was held in a private family trust, established years earlier, structured after my husband's death on the advice of a quiet attorney who believed in planning for worst-case scenarios. I was the trustee, the beneficiary, the sole authority. Logan's name was nowhere on it. He could not sell it. He could not touch it. He could not even see it without my consent. I laughed then, not loudly, not hysterically, just a short, breathless sound of disbelief. My son had stolen my money, yes. He had tried to make me homeless, yes. But in his arrogance, in his certainty that he knew everything about my life, he had made a fatal mistake. He had sold the wrong house, and in doing so, he had exposed himself to something far more dangerous than an angry mother. He had exposed himself to the law. I looked around my living room. The evening light softened the familiar furniture, the quiet walls that had held my life together for so long. This was still my home. And now, for the first time since the phone rang that morning in the coffee shop, I felt something close to control return to my hands. Logan thought the story was over. In reality, it had just reached its turning point. The next morning, an email arrived from Logan. No apology, no explanation. Attached was a scanned document with a single line of text beneath it. "This is the power of attorney you signed. Everything I did was legal." I opened the file. My name was there, my address, my signature. And yet, the moment I saw it, I knew something was wrong. The signature looked like mine at first glance, but it lacked weight. The lines were uneven, hesitant, not the steady hand I had developed over decades of signing official records, affidavits, and legal forms. This signature looked like it had been written by someone tired, disoriented, rushed. My eyes moved to the date. It was signed during the 4 days I had been hospitalized the previous year after a mild stroke scare. I remembered that week vividly. The dizziness, the medication, the way time blurred into fragments. Logan had visited me once, late in the evening, carrying a stack of papers. He had said they were insurance forms. I remembered being exhausted. I remembered trusting him. I did not remember granting him control over my entire life. My hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from realization. I called Daniel Brooks. Daniel had worked alongside me years ago when I was still employed in municipal administration. He was cautious, meticulous, and deeply allergic to shortcuts. If anyone could tell me the truth, it was him. He asked me to bring the document in immediately. By noon, I was sitting across from him in his quiet office, the paper laid flat between us. He examined it slowly, saying nothing at first. Then he leaned back in his chair. "Evelyn," he said, "this document is deeply problematic." He pointed to the notary stamp. The notary license was expired at the time of signing. He pointed to the formatting. "This template is outdated. It has not been legally used in this state for years." Then he tapped the date again. "And this date corresponds exactly to your hospital admission. which means if this signature is yours, it was obtained under questionable circumstances. I swallowed hard. If. Daniel looked at me carefully. If someone brought papers to you while you were medicated and told you they were something else, that is deception. And if the notary was added later, that is forgery. The word hung in the air. Forgery. My phone buzzed again. A text from Logan. Why are you making this difficult? Just tell the bank it was authorized. Madeline is stressed, and this is ruining everything. Ruining everything. I thought about the house he believed he had sold. The tenants who had no idea strangers might soon knock on their door. The buyers who would discover they had been misled. The bank records that showed careful withdrawals over months. This was not a mistake. This was a system. I asked Daniel what my options were. He did not sugarcoat them. You can stay silent, he said. You can try to settle privately. Or you can report this and protect yourself. But understand this. Once you involve authorities, there is no halfway point. I nodded. Later that afternoon, Logan called again. His voice had changed. Sharper, more controlled. You signed those papers, Mom. You can't pretend you didn't. I signed what you told me were insurance forms while I was sick, I replied. If you turn that into something else, that is not consent. You are overreacting, he snapped. People do this all the time. Parents help their kids. You just don't like Madeline, and you're punishing us. There it was, the shift. From justification to accusation, from son to adversary. That night I sat alone at my kitchen table, the documents spread out before me. The house was quiet, too quiet. I realized something then that cut deeper than the theft itself. Logan did not believe he had done anything wrong. In his mind, I was not a person with rights. I was a resource, a stepping stone, a temporary obstacle between him and the life he wanted. And people who think that way do not stop on their own. They have to be stopped. I closed the folder, turned off the light, and made a decision that would change everything. The document that should not exist would no longer stay hidden, and neither would the truth. The first knock came 2 days later. I knew it was them before I reached the door. There was a certain rhythm to Logan's knock now, confident, impatient, as if this house still belonged to him in his mind. Madeline stood beside him when I opened the door. Perfect posture, perfect hair, a smile that did not reach her eyes. We need to talk, Logan said, already stepping inside. I did not invite them in, but I did not stop them either. I wanted to hear what came next. I wanted to understand how far they were willing to go. They sat on my couch like they owned it. Logan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice suddenly soft. Mom, this has gotten out of hand, he said. The bank froze some transfers. The title company keeps calling. You need to fix this. Fix what? I asked. The theft or the forgery? Madeline exhaled sharply. You're being dramatic. She crossed her legs slowly, deliberately. You're 64. You live alone. You get confused sometimes. That's not an insult. It's reality. Logan nodded, encouraged. We're just trying to help. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. You emptied my accounts, I said evenly. You sold a property under false pretenses. You used documents signed while I was medicated. Logan's expression hardened. You signed them, he said. End of story. "And if I tell the authorities you deceived me while I was hospitalized," I asked, "what do you think they will call that?" Madeline laughed, not kindly. "They'll call it a family dispute," she said, "and they'll believe us." She leaned closer. "Do you know how easy it is to suggest cognitive decline? One doctor's note, a few statements about memory lapses. We could have you declared incompetent." The word hung in the air. Incompetent. Logan did not object. He did not look surprised. He looked relieved. "You don't want things to get ugly," he said quietly. "If you cooperate, this can all go away." Cooperate, meaning lie, meaning surrender, meaning accept that my role in his life had been reduced to a signature and a bank balance. I stood up. Both of them looked startled. "You need to leave," I said. "Mom," Logan warned. "Now," I repeated. My voice did not rise. It sharpened. Madeline stood as well, her smile gone. "You're making a mistake," she said. "No one will take your side. Not over your own son." I walked to the front door and opened it. "You have 3 seconds," I said. "Then I call the police." Logan stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as his mother, but as someone who would not bend. Madeline grabbed his arm. "Come on," she snapped. "She's bluffing." I was not. They left. The moment the door closed, my knees weakened. I sat down slowly, my heart pounding. Not from fear of them, but from the realization of what had just happened. They had threatened me, not with anger, with procedure, with paperwork, with the quiet, terrifying power of systems I knew all too well. That night, I did not sleep. Instead, I organized. I gathered bank statements, medical records, emails, text messages, lease agreements, copies of the forged document. Everything I had ever kept, because old habits die hard. By morning, my dining table looked like a case file. I made the calls: the bank fraud department, the county records office, a detective recommended by Daniel Brooks. Each conversation stripped away another layer of denial. By the time the sun rose fully over Houston, the truth was undeniable. This was no longer about money. This was about control. And blood, I realized, could be used as a weapon just as easily as it could be used as an excuse. I picked up my phone one last time and sent a single message to Logan. "Do not contact me again. All communication will go through my attorney." I pressed send. There was no going back now. And for the first time since that morning in the coffee shop, I felt something steadier than fear. I felt resolved. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Fluorescent lights hummed softly above polished wooden benches. Every sound felt amplified: the scrape of a chair, the rustle of paper, the steady ticking of a clock I could not see but could feel. I sat at the witness table with my hands folded neatly in my lap. Across the room, Logan avoided my eyes. Madeline was not beside him. That was the first thing I noticed. She sat several rows back, separated from him, her posture stiff, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Not once did she look in his direction. Whatever alliance they had built on stolen money and shared arrogance had already begun to fracture. The prosecutor began with the facts: bank records showing a pattern of withdrawals over time, not a single emergency transfer, not one attempt to inform me, just methodical extraction. Then the forged power of attorney. A handwriting expert explained how the pressure angle, and hesitation in the signature were inconsistent with my normal writing, but consistent with someone signing while medicated or disoriented. A notary investigator testified that the stamp belonged to a license that had expired months before the document was allegedly signed. The tenants from Cedar Ridge testified next. They spoke calmly about receiving notice from strangers claiming to own the home they were living in, about the fear of losing stability, about discovering the sale should never have happened. Each testimony tightened the room. When Logan's attorney stood to defend him, the argument was thin. A concerned son, an aging mother, a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Then Logan took the stand. He spoke confidently at first, about responsibility, about wanting to protect me, about how everything he did was with my best interest in mind. But confidence does not survive scrutiny. The prosecutor asked him simple questions. Why was the power of attorney dated during a hospital stay? Why was the notary invalid? Why were the funds transferred incrementally rather than openly? Why were tenants not disclosed? His answers became slower, less certain. He contradicted himself, once, then again. When asked why he never informed me in writing about the transfers or the sale, he had no answer. Silence is loud in a courtroom. Madeline stood abruptly and left before closing arguments. She did not look back. When the jury returned, I did not hold my breath. I already knew. Guilty, on every count. The word echoed through the room, final and irreversible. Logan's shoulders collapsed. His hands trembled. He looked toward me then, really looked, not with anger or entitlement, but with fear. I met his gaze, not with triumph, not with satisfaction, but with something far heavier: acceptance. The judge scheduled sentencing and ordered immediate asset freezes and restitution proceedings. The sound of the gavel felt like a door closing. As I stood to leave, a reporter called my name. "How does it feel," she asked, "to see your own son convicted?" I paused. "It feels like the truth finally caught up," I said, "and truth does not care who you are related to." Outside, the sun was bright. Houston traffic moved on, indifferent to the small tragedy that had just concluded inside a government building. I walked to my car alone. The betrayal had been exposed, the lies dismantled, and for the first time since this began, the story was no longer being told by those who tried to take from me. It was being told by the facts. And facts, unlike blood, do not lie. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. Logan stood before the judge, thinner than I remembered, his confidence stripped away, his voice barely steady as he spoke. He apologized, not with the practiced tone he had used before, but with something raw and fractured. For the first time, he did not blame stress, love, or circumstance. He blamed himself. The judge listened without interruption. Then she spoke. She said his crimes were not impulsive. They were calculated. She said exploiting a parent during illness crossed a line the law does not forgive lightly. She sentenced him to prison time with mandatory restitution and a permanent financial crime record. Logan was led away in handcuffs. I did not stand. I did not wave. I did not cry. I sat still and let the moment pass through me. Madeline never came to sentencing. I learned later that she had moved out of state, changed jobs, and removed her last name from every shared account. When consequences arrived, she vanished. The condo they bought was seized. The accounts were frozen. I received my first restitution payment months later. It was not the amount that mattered. It was the acknowledgement. I went home that afternoon and sat at my kitchen table in silence. For a long time, I mourned. Not the money, not the house. I mourned the son I thought I had raised, the version of him that existed only in memory. But grief does not end you if you let it teach you. I began volunteering at a local senior center, then advising quietly, then speaking openly. I helped people understand documents, recognize manipulation, and protect themselves before it was too late. Word spread. What began as pain became purpose. I learned something important in the aftermath. Justice does not heal everything, but it restores balance, and balance is what allows life to continue without fear. Looking back now, there are 5 lessons I carry with me. First, love without boundaries creates entitlement. Second, trust must be protected even within family. Third, silence enables abuse more than anger ever could. Fourth, age does not mean weakness or confusion. Fifth, protecting yourself is not betrayal, it is survival. My son did not go to prison because I reported him. He went to prison because of what he chose to do. I still drink my coffee every morning, sometimes at home, sometimes at the same small cafe in Houston where this story began. Life did not end that day. It changed, and I am still here. Thank you for listening to my story until the end. If this story meant something to you, please like and share this video so it can reach someone who needs it. Tell me in the comments what lesson you took from this story and which city you are watching from.